Start? Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Jim McHugh, and I've got an interesting group of characters joining me today to talk to you about management and UCS. So let's go down the line. You guys can introduce yourselves real quick. So, Todd?
Hey everybody, Todd Brannon here. I lead up product marketing for UCS. I've been at Cisco for about 5 years, about 4 now. Long time in the server business and had a lot of fun here with UCS.
Great. And Ranjit?
My name is Ranjit, and I am a senior marketing manager for the Cisco UCS management aspects.
And Joann?
Hi, this is Joann Starke. I am a solutions marketing manager, and I'll be talking to you about UCS Director.
And last but not least, Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Williams. I'm a technical marketing engineer for UCS. I'm our systems management, automation, and API expert.
All right, so let's jump in. So, Todd, let's start with you. So
okay.
Today we're going to be talking about management, and data centers have been using systems management for years and years and years. So what's unique about UCS? Why are we here? What's so special about what we're going to talk about today?
You bet. I bet that's the right place to start off, Jim. I mean, I think when you're talking about UCS and management, you really start to look at the architecture of the system itself because they're really one and the same in a lot of ways. So there's what I would call 3 magic innovations in UCS that we can frame the whole conversation around, really. One is this idea of a fabric-centric system design. The second is total hardware abstraction. The third would be this idea of openness and an API-first design. So historically, I think a lot of the folks on the Hangout here that have been around the server business for a while know that for the longest time, the design ethos in the business was really server-centric. And with UCS, we really kind of turned that around to focus on all the connections between servers and everything else in the data center, and kind of try to eliminate those silos, bring them all together. And to do that, we had to build this centralized control plane for UCS. So it's really the foundation on which everything else is built that we're going to talk about. You can essentially manage up to 160 servers. They're all connected to one fabric interconnect in our system through what's really, truly one pane of glass. So, I think when you start there, you also consider, if folks on this watch our Hangout from our competitors kind of do a deep soul searching, they'll realize that really traditionally systems management's been an afterthought in server design. After all the speeds and feeds are set, okay, of course we're going to have our baseboard management controller, and our servers, our customers know how to put all this stuff together, and we'll kind of leave it to them. But with UCS, that centralized design, a fabric-centric approach, and systems management was part of the design ethos from the very beginning. So the second concept there is this idea of total abstraction of hardware, and this is where UCS really stands apart in many ways because nobody else had done this yet. So when we designed UCS, we made every identity setting, so think your UIDs, MAC addresses, worldwide names, all of that, and all of the configuration settings of not just the servers, but all of the I/O components in the servers, the access layer networking for LAN and SAN, all that can be configured by that central management point that we talked about. And furthermore, it's housed in a data model there, and that opens you up for this API discussion we'll have. So that's really foundational. And when we did that, it eliminated all this manual administration work that people used to have to do. So all the manual knob turning around configuration, the system is really, in many senses, self-integrating. As you add components, they're auto-discovered by this centralized control plane. We call it UCS Manager, and then that in turn sets you up for all these ideas of pools of elasticity, scale, highly scalable, right? So the third piece I said was openness, right? So once you've got that centralized control plane, a centralized data model, the magic that really kind of sets it all off is opening that all up northbound through an XML API. So fabric-centric design, total abstraction of the system elements, so being able to assign personality on the fly and eliminate that manual configuration, and then making that all open via an API. Those are the 3 kind of key foundational pieces we want to talk about today.
So, server workloads vary a lot, but at the end of the day, we're really just trying to get people to run applications and run them successfully. So, Todd, maybe since we're helping people soul search today, let's talk about how UCS management simplifies the operations as well, and help them soul search on that topic as well.
You bet. I mean, nobody goes out to buy a server to use as a coat warmer, right? I mean, there's an application in mind for all of that hardware, and so when you think about what the DevOps team has to do, what the system admins have to do, it's really tune those servers to the needs of a particular workload or a particular application. And a lot of that, a lot of the complexity within the box is around your storage setup, so boot targets, that type of thing, RAID settings. But maybe the most complex piece of it is all the I/O. And so one of the real big breakthroughs that we've got is this ability to virtualize the I/O coming in and out of the server in something we call a virtual interface card. And so if you have a machine you're going to set up to carry a bunch of virtual machines, you're going to need maybe 4 or 6 Ethernet connections, a couple of HBAs. We can take that one adapter and create those on the fly. If you have a different type of workload like a database where maybe you're not going to be connecting up to a SAN, you've got a lot of local disk and you just need big Ethernet pipes, we can build that for you. So really, when you think about all the settings that come together to create this personality or this system image, we've encapsulated that in something we call a service profile, and it's maintained in that data model by that central point of management. And that just sets you up for all kinds of automation possibilities. It also eliminates a lot of the just manual labor that people used to have to do to provision servers. You take that out of the equation, and it also reduces a lot of the error and configuration drift. So if you think about what a DevOps team has to do to take a system from from development into test, into staging, into production, they're seeking that gold image that they know works, and preserving that and eliminating configuration drift has been the bane of the admin team since the dawn of time. And so when you have everything locked down in that record of a service profile, you have something that's durable and it can move through those phases of the process and eliminate a lot of problems. And then as you go forward, if you define what it is to be a database server, what it is to be a web server, when you need to go out and say do a firmware upgrade, you can do it to that. It's almost like Plato's ideal, right? You can go do it to that central core image of your say database server, and definitively that those changes are being rolled out the right way to every server that fits that profile and that application in your environment. So it's really a revolutionary step forward for the way people can manage systems in the data center, for how they can get applications from development and into production.
Awesome. So let's build upon that a little bit. The idea of data centers, there's a mix of hardware, mix of server hardware in there, and traditionally blades have a little bit off in a silo and how people manage them.
Yep.
What do we do different that actually takes away this headache of the silo in management? Let's go through that.
So back to soul searching, right? If you dial back to about anywhere between 2000 to 2005, the industry took the contents of a 42U rack, what you commonly found there, so systems management servers, application, all your different types of servers, basically, keyboard, monitor, mouse, consoles, all that stuff, crammed it down into a 10U box that we are not familiar with as kind of a traditional blade enclosure. And when we did that, we basically spawned an entirely new set of management tools. So now customers are, back at that time, forced to think about, okay, now I've got this set of tools to manage my blade environment, I've got my traditional tools that I use to manage my rack environment, and really not an optimal situation. So with UCS, we're really form factor agnostic. So you could almost think of a UCS system as this large virtualized blade chassis that can hold up to 160 servers, right? And if you need a 4U 19-inch server or blade that has a lot of local disk and 4 Xeon E7s in it, I can give you that blade, so to speak, and it's a C440 rack server, but you manage it the exact same way you would a half-width, B200 high-density blade. So it's, I think that's probably one of the least understood kind of breakthroughs that comes with this fabric-centric architecture, is that you no longer have to worry about what the shape of the box is. I mean, people really shouldn't care. What they care about is, what's the ratio of cores, the memory, the local disk, to I/O capacity for the different workloads, and then the shape of the box is really just an outcome of those set of choices, but you shouldn't have to manage it, in a separate and different way. So we have, all these connectivity, kind of technologies that we brought together. We're beginning to call single connect technology, and that really is, one connection for your rack and blade, one connection for LAN, SAN, and management, one connection for physical and virtual. So really just breaking down the whole, design ethos to get to that true one pane of management, and get people out of the mode of having to manage different infrastructure different ways.
That's great. So Ranjit, let's get you in the conversation here. Let's talk about the world of APIs and why APIs are so helpful and useful when it comes to managing UCS.
Yes. So Todd started off telling about how we have an API first design. Now, this API first design has several different values to it. The value is the fact that now we can do a programmatic access of all the infrastructure. And as we move into a more service-oriented architecture, all of the infrastructure as well is going to show up as an API. So the programmatic capability, the API, allows for the setup of infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, or even software as a service at the highest level once it is available. So that's one important thing. The second is, even if we don't want to have a service available as for consumption, the API allows for automation. Todd touched upon this as well. And when we have a programmatic access to infrastructure, then we are able to automate certain pieces. We can have tasks automated, or as we go further, we can probably have automation of multiple things together. So in some sense, people call it orchestration of multiple domains. So we start with the automation of the server infrastructure, and then we go ahead and probably even automate the setup of the network and setup of the storage. So that's the second capability, which is brought about by the API. And finally, other important aspect is the fact that because of this API, there are other tools, ISV tools, tools from, say, CA or IBM or even Microsoft and everyone. These tools are already in place, and so what it allows is for them to integrate through a software mechanism to the hardware. Now they can manage the hardware, they can see alerts coming from it, they can make some configuration changes as needed with the automation and API capabilities.
So basically what you're saying is if our customers are already used to using CA, BMC, or Microsoft System Center, for example, they can continue to use those tools because of our API and our openness of how we're doing a management approach, they automatically can integrate and work with those.
That's correct. That's right, Jim. So as a result of this API being available, we already have certain integrations in place. So if a customer is using, say, BMC or CA or Microsoft in their data centers, some of these integrations are already in place, and they can use it right away. In some cases, or some other application tools might be available today, and for that we provide a IVT lab. Customers or ISV vendors can come in, they can test out their tools, they can write to this API and check whether their tools are working with the API. So that's another benefit that the API provides. And finally, if the ISV has not written the tools, in some cases we provide the necessary packs or plugins that would go into the software. For example, in the case of System Center, we might provide some plugins and solution packs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I definitely forgot to mention. I mean, I think that's maybe it's interesting. We can probably say that UCS is the most open platform in the industry in that respect, and it's crucial because nobody likes to change the way they operate. You know, to take advantage of new technology, you shouldn't have to forklift out everything you've already got. So. All that deep integration work that's happened over the past 4 years with all those folks like your Tivolis and your CAs and your BMCs, it's been absolutely crucial. And I think we've got, it's almost like the old BASF ads where we don't make the surfboards, but we make them better. You know, when you have one of those management environments, you can do more with UCS through those than you can with other servers because of that deep programmability that we've surfaced up through the API.
That's great. So Eric, let's get you involved a little bit in the conversation here. Ranjit had mentioned some of the plugins that are available for System Center 2012. Can you address some of those and what are the value of having plugins?
Yeah, I definitely can. I mean, if you just to talk about what, you know, to layer on what Todd and Ranjit have said, a big area with UCS was having that central API day one. That was a big pillar of our design consideration. And some areas that we were started to focus on after developing UCS was really figuring out what software development kits we wanted to layer on top of it. And so everything that we've done with environments like Microsoft with System Center and such has started for us with an SDK or a software development kit. That development kit for us is a PowerShell module called UCS Power Tool. So that PowerShell module gives you the same capabilities that you get with the GUI. And with UCS, what we've done with that central API, we have an API that's 100% open. And that 100% open API that our GUI and CLI use, we're using the same API with PowerShell to do automation, inventory gathering, and those types of things. So we have written a PowerShell library that allows you to do 100% integration across the board with UCS in PowerShell form. So for folks that have used PowerCLI from VMware or any of the PowerShell modules from Microsoft, like to do DNS management, Exchange management, SQL Server management, etc., we have the same type of capability, but for your hardware infrastructure. And so that PowerShell module we're using across the board to integrate with System Center with things like System Center Virtual Machine Manager, where we have a UI extension that will sit inside of the actual VMM console that gives you a view into UCS Manager that you would have to launch our UCS GUI for right in the console. So that gives you the ability to see the faults on a particular set of hardware, see what hypervisors are running on the actual pieces of hardware, and give you that correlation that you wouldn't get without having that type of integration. So secondly, we have integration packs for like Operations Manager from Microsoft. So their System Center Operations Manager monitoring tool. We've had those particular we've had a version for UCS Manager available for quite a while, and have a newer version coming out for our standalone C-Series servers as well, where we have an API to integrate with those on a one-by-one basis. And those management packs give you that alerting view that allows you to grab that information and correlate it with your operating systems and applications that are running in on top of your UCS hardware. Another pack that we have as well is an integration pack for System Center Orchestrator. So that's Microsoft's orchestration and automation product, their workflow product, that allows you to integrate UCS tasks into an automation workflow. So things like being able to create a service profile from a template, associate it with a piece of hardware, and then start to layer on applications and operating systems on top of it. So if you need to extend out a HyperV cluster, then you can add another HyperV host on top of it and make that automated from bare metal to actually using it.
Okay, that's great. So Eric, I'm going to come back to you in a moment and ask you how our customers are taking advantage of these integrations, but I want to reward the questions that come in. And so we did have a question about clarification on Single Connect. So let's go back to you, Todd. The question was Single Connect, what is the name, what's the acronym, how does it come together?
Yep, no, it's a great question. I think as a product marketer with UCS, I've had the unusual position here of having a problem with plenty. And the plenty being there's so much innovation that was packed into this system. And Cisco had an unfair advantage in 06 when they sat down to build this thing because they had a clean slate opportunity to kind of rethink the entire architecture, soup to nuts. And so all of that innovation, taken separately, there's just so much of it to talk about. You can quickly get lost into a lot of different details. So we've always been struggling to try and convey some of the really base, or I should say, aggregated benefits of the system in a simpler way. So as all good product marketers do, we sat down and studied this problem. So we came up with this term called Single Connect, and really it's this if you look at any of our system designs that we have out on the web, or if you come to visit us at a trade show, you'll see these pretty magical little blue cables that connect UCS together, and literally with one cable, we obviously customers always go for path redundancy and have your A and B fabric. But literally with one cable, you can connect up an entire chassis of UCS blades, and that gets you your LAN and SAN connectivity, all of your storage protocols. It gets you your systems management, all in one cable. You've got your virtual and your physical network traffic that you can watch from UCS Manager through that single connection. And then again, you can connect either a chassis full of blade servers with that cable, or you can connect up a fabric extender with a bunch of rack servers underneath it with that magical blue cable. So it's literally a single connection for everything in the system. And so we've been, there's a lot of technology underneath it that kind of, conspire to give rise to that. So we've got things like our Fabric Interconnect and our Fabric Extenders, that whole set of technologies that provide us this highly scalable, one single one single logical switch that's physically distributed. So the whole Fabric Extender concept. We've got things like our virtual machine Fabric Extender. So this is where we literally take the network and extend it all the way through into the physical machine and down to individual virtual machines and individual ports on individual adapters on individual virtual machines. We have that whole set of technology. And then, of course, we've got Unified Fabric, which started with our Cisco Nexus line, bringing together the storage traffic and the Ethernet traffic. So you look at all these technologies in isolation, and they sound great. But what's it really mean to people? It means you got one magical blue cable that you can use to connect this whole system together and get everything that you need in terms of server connectivity. So Single Connect is purely a marketing term that we've created to capture all these aggregated benefits. So we're going to be rolling that out at VMworld here in a couple of weeks. We'll have a demo in the booth if you guys come by. But that's really what Single Connect's all about.
So that's pretty cool. Everybody else has to rely upon engineering, and we have magic on our side. So
that's right.
That's clearly why we're ahead of the whole world here. All right. So Eric, let's come back to you. In addition to all the integration, can you tell me a little bit about how our customers are benefiting from the magic that we have going today?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So I would say there's a couple, three different areas of how I see most people using our integration. We're using it in one way to get a lot of the inventory information out. So think of using UCS Power Tool to connect to multiple domains to gather information about what hardware you have, what are the serial numbers for each device and whatnot, and populating those types of things into your configuration management database that you have centrally. So I've worked a lot with a particular customer that has over 60 domains and 5,000 servers, and they've written a PowerShell script about 60 to 70 lines long that queries every UCS domain that they have, all 62 of them, and gathers information about every piece of hardware, every DIMM, every CPU, every adapter, every blade, etc., everything in each domain, and pulls it out and puts it into their SQL database that they have for their central management database. So think about having to do that manually. That would be a very large task to be able to do. Now they actually have it updated every couple hours automatically with some scripting that they've been able to do. So very minimal effort, very high gain in their particular environment. So other areas that we see people utilize our scripting and our SDKs are around automation. So having UCS, really be a bigger part of their automation. So let's say you want to automate storage and your hardware, your configuration, as well as up the stack into your operating system and application level information or automation. So having those APIs to integrate with and these toolkits to use, you can use things like UCS Power Tool to be a cog in a bigger automation machine to automate end-to-end automatically the provisioning from bare metal to being utilized. The last one that I really start to see is people doing a lot of day-to-day tasks and such where they want to be able to make it easier to be consistent from one configuration to another. So they'll use things like UCS Power Tool to learn how to automate some more remedial tasks like adding 500 VLANs to a UCS domain or to 5 domains or 10 domains. And so there's a really cool toolkit that some people know about, not a lot of people know about, inside of UCS Power Tool, and it's a command called Convert to UCS Commandlet. And that particular command allows you to monitor the UCS GUI, allow you to do something in the GUI like adding a VLAN, creating a service profile, or a boot policy. Do it in the GUI, but get instant gratification where it shows you the code to actually redo that in UCS Power Tool. So you can go do something in the GUI that you're familiar with, but then learn and let Power Tool do the work for you to be able to automate that. So they can basically get instant gratification on how to script that, cut and paste that, put it into a script, and now they've gone from 0 to 60 in automation very quickly.
That's really cool. I mean, who doesn't love instant gratification? So But for those that have to plan and learn and figure things out, Ranjit, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the resources that are available for people that are trying to either use or integrate with the software.
Sure. So Jim, we have several resources, and if someone wants to just find out about UCS, then of course Cisco.com is there. There are user groups in different cities, so people can go to the closest user group. And in order to help those who cannot attend these user groups, we also have a user group online. It's a virtual user group, and system admins and end users can benefit from this. They can ask their questions. They can see some of the traffic out there, and it's been newly launched. It's communities.cisco.com/UCSM. So it's communities.cisco.com/UCSM. Now, if you are a ISV or a developer, then there are other tools which are useful. We have that on Cisco Developer Network. On Cisco Developer Network, there are tools like developer guides, and also some question answers, and even things like how can sandboxes for them to play with. So these tools are available to them for free. They can use it, and as we know, it's an open API, so they can download it for free. Now, one cool tool which lets them actually use all of these tools and do the software actually play with the software without having any of the hardware. So that's something very cool, because you can do something upfront even before you have the hardware in place. So that's the UCS platform emulator. Again, it moves with the development of the software. So once a release of software is available, the corresponding UCS platform emulator is available. So developers as well as users can test out their scripts. They can test out their programs against this platform emulator.
And you can pull in also hardware. If they have real systems, you can actually connect the emulator to your real system and pull in the configuration of hardware that you have to be able to emulate your exact configuration in your data center as well.
That's pretty darn cool stuff. So Todd, before we start moving on to other parts of our discussion today, anything that we've missed about the benefits that customers get from our UCS management tools?
You bet. I mean, I think there's a ton of anecdotes, talking about the emulator. I've met customers that actually use the emulator. They were so excited about getting the UCS system. They use the emulator to basically construct their environment before the product had even hit their loading dock. So, there's a company called Travelport. They're kind of the back end to a lot of the big travel sites that we know. A gentleman there by the name of Steve Senecal was telling me a story where he came into work one day and they had received 190 rack mount servers, UCS rack mount servers the day before, and the data center team had sort of racked them up and gotten them cabled in, and then his engineering team is on the hook to basically provision all those systems, get the image to a point where they can hand it off to the platform engineering team to then install all the application and basically finish putting it into production. So his engineer pops up over the cue ball at about 10:30 and says, "Hey, I just provisioned 190 servers," with a big grin on his face. "Let's go to lunch." And just the sheer joy, that kind of experience versus the 4 or 5 days of kind of manual effort that they would have had to go through. You can really see that the customers love it. I mean, at an aggregate level, we've done some work. We go through a lot of the case studies that we've performed over the past few years and kind of tried to average out kind of indicative results across a broad span of our customers. In terms of ongoing management costs, so pure administrative relief, about a 60% reduction on average in ongoing labor for maintaining your environment. In terms of speed or just sheer velocity, having these service profiles at the ready to apply onto bare metal, 80% on average, that's 80% average reduction in deployment times. So really changed up the way people can think about how they're going to operate, the types of SLAs they're going to deliver to the business. Other things that we've seen across the board, about an 80% reduction in cabling. And cabling costs, depending on which analyst you ask, I've seen numbers ranging from $800 to $1,500 for the cost of a single cable in the data center over its lifetime, and that's all associated with labor. If you're in a colo environment and you need to get something recabled because you want to whatever, add a server into the SAN and run that cabling, you're going to get charged for all that. And so, over the, with UCS, you can just configure that connection to the SAN on the fly. No touching the cables required. So 60% reduction in ongoing management costs, 80% reduction in provisioning time, 80% reduction in cost of cabling. Those are just some of the things that we've seen, on an aggregate basis.
All right, Eric, you want to go ahead and hit that question?
Yeah, there was a question out there asking about, is there a HyperV version of the emulator or a way to install one? Yeah, with the 2.1.1a release that we added for the emulator, we started shipping a OVA and a zip file, both for the emulator, and there's instructions in the user guide that actually tells you how to convert the VMBKs to VHD to support HyperV. So it is a fully supported hypervisor with version 2.1.1a and later.
Awesome. That's good news. So Ranjit, let's start talking about scale and how our management tools help when the server infrastructure continues to grow. And little hint, we're heading towards UCS Central for those of you following it along at home.
It's magical.
It is magical.
So Jim, yeah, as you can expect, all the server infrastructure grows over time. And within the UCS management portfolio, we have a product which handles a large scale. Now, before we go to the larger scale, it is important to address how much and what does UCS Manager manage. So we started off, we talked about the API, which is also for the UCS Manager and UCS Central and as well as UCS Director. But if you look at UCS Manager, it can manage up to 160 servers within a domain. Now, it's important to address the term domain because domain here means all the devices within a system. So it's not just the 160 servers, it's the fabric interconnect, the fabric extender, and all the VICs, etc., that are part of that domain. That becomes a single domain which is managed by a UCS manager. Now, as we scale beyond a domain, so there's obviously there are many reasons why you could have less than 160 servers and then decide I will create a new instance of a UCS manager and have a completely isolated version or an isolated domain. In that case, we need something which can allow us to take the same policies that we have in one domain to the other. Now, before the introduction of UCS Center, you'd have to replicate that. You'd have to do that all over again. Now, we have UCS Central 1.0 was released last year. We have a 1.1 release which just came out a couple of weeks ago. And what it does is it allows for global service pool management, global service profile management, and global fault and log management. Well, what does global mean here? That is, there is one single view of all the UCS infrastructure within a enterprise, whether it is in one data center or across data centers. So this has several different benefits to it. It provides the ability to look at things, to standardize things at a global level. Now, it is provided as a virtual machine. It runs either in a HyperV hypervisor or in an ESX hypervisor. So the installation of UCS Central becomes very simple. Now, once it is installed, it can look at multiple domains. So we are talking here scale of 10,000 servers. So we know that there are domains in here. And I believe Cisco IT is one which has 8,000 plus servers which are being managed today. And now they can have a global management capability, a place from which all the profiles, the policies can be set up at a global level.
So do you want to highlight some of the use cases that we expect our customers will be able to take advantage of by adding UCS Central on top of UCS Manager?
Yes. So as I mentioned, one of the things that you want to do is when you add a second domain, you don't want to reset everything or start from scratch. So bringing an additional domain online now becomes very easy. All the profiles have been set up in the first instance, and now we reuse them. There is also the fact that if we have a global pool, then the pools can straddle across multiple domains, and the pool numbers, etc., can be reused across multiple domains. Now, the second thing is if you want to have a centralized inventory of all the UCS servers and domains, then UCS Central is the place to go. And also to look at faults across domains. So it becomes important when you see one domain failing for some reason, it always helps to see it at a global level to see what is happening in the different domains. And a natural extension is the fact that because I know how the different domains are being used, how the servers are being used, I have a sense of the capacity, what kind of performance do I get, and when should I add capacity. So I've got 4 domains, I'm running at 80%, maybe it's time for me to get a new domain, add a set of servers at this point. And UCS Central gives you that visibility, which now lets you do that. And finally, an important aspect of the UCS management portfolio is the firmware update. Most data centers, most environments find it difficult to manage the firmware. The firmware updates go on in their own cycle. And with UCS Central, what we can do is not only manage the firmware in one domain, but now it can be centralized and all domains can be updated at the same time. So the standardization of the firmware becomes a much simpler task, and hence the compliance, other requirements that require the firmware to be updated to certain levels are met. So these are big benefits that data centers which adopt UCS Central can see.
And one thing I would recommend is that you go grab the emulator. For folks that are wanting to start getting up to speed and learn UCS Central, you don't need hardware to learn it. Go get the UCS Central VM, grab the emulator, and spin up as many emulators as you need to simulate your environment. And it's internally actually how we actually scale test. UCS Central, we scale up 100 or 200 UCS platform emulators and such. You can do the same thing in your environment to simulate your hardware as well, to simulate how to manage multiple domains without having to have that much hardware, extra hardware.
All right, that's great. All right, so we've talked a lot about UCS Manager, UCS Central being a manager of managers. And Joann, you've been so calm and polite and waiting for us to finally ask you a question about UCS Director. So how does UCS Director fit into all this?
So it's a natural progression. If you think about a management stack, UCS Director is the next step. So we've just talked about the fact that UCS Manager is designed to manage a single domain, UCS Central multiple domains. Now we're going up, and UCS Directors is designed to manage UCS-based converged infrastructures like FlexPod, vBlock, vSpecs, as well as those infrastructures that you create with multiple vendor solutions.
So if I was to say, what problem does UCS Director solve, how would you answer that?
Well, the strategic discussion today among CIOs and IT managers is that they just need to figure out how to increase the business agility and the operational efficiency in their environments. The need to simplify and to more easily manage this complex space is really apparent when you look at what IDC and other folks are saying. 70% of operational costs are going towards managing infrastructure. This leads to a focus in the data center of I'm going to pay attention to what I have today rather than focusing in on my new services. So what UCS Director does is it helps CIOs and IT managers address these concerns by providing end-to-end IT processes that they abstract the complexity of these individual devices, the hypervisors and the virtual machines, and it enables resource delivery from a single pane of glass across virtual, compute, network, and storage layers.
So I guess we should share with everybody that doesn't know and hasn't been following this that UCS Director is the artist formerly known as Cloupia.
Yes.
And we went out and acquired Cloupia for a reason. And so maybe explain why we think Cloupia, now UCS Director, is so much better than the infrastructure automation tools that are already out there in the market.
So if you look at what's out there, there's one thing that separates formerly Cloupia UCS Director from the rest of the pack, and that is when it was designed with a clean sheet of paper. The the founders understood that converged infrastructure was coming into the data center, and that just managing one segment, in this case virtual, isn't sufficient to help IT be able to get that efficiency and that flexibility that they're looking for. And so what they've done is they've designed it from the very beginning to manage physical, virtual, bare metal, to address all those time-consuming, manual, complex processes that are in the data center today. How is that different? Well, if you look at the other solutions that are out there in the marketplace, a lot of them were created by acquisition. So you have different products, different solutions that are now coming into the mix. They're being bolted on, which means that they have different API layers, they have different architectural layers. UCS Director has one API, one architectural layer, so it all works together seamlessly. One of the things that people don't understand is that when virtualization first came out, it was sold as a way of reducing the complexity, and it does. However, if you look at the facts, it's one of the main causes of all this OpEx going out through the roof. And so one of the things that we really need to do is be able to provide a solution that can manage everything, not just the virtual machines, but be able to manage the networking, the software, and the virtualization layer as well as one in order to begin to create these efficiencies. So one of the other things that it brings to the table is consistency, and I'm amazed at the number of customers that say, I can't believe the efficiencies I get. And if you think about it, Johnny Storage may have brought maybe not exactly the best practices from a previous job, or you have multiple people setting up infrastructure. Perhaps they don't all do it the same way. One of the other things UCS Director brings to the table is consistency. So when you set up, let's say, an IIS server, it's set up the same way every single time, and it reduces human error. It's amazing the efficiencies that bring to your environment.
So are there any specific differentiators you want to call out? I know you kind of went through there in pretty good detail, but I'll give you a chance to summarize.
Well, I think there's two that we'd like to bring out. And the first is the orchestration tool. You know, there's script-based orchestration and there's model-based orchestration. Script-based is linear. You go from point A to point B. They're static. Unfortunately, data centers aren't static. And so what happens is if something moves in the data center, for example, a storage LUN, that script's now broken. And as many customers have very nicely reminded me, that takes a long time in order for you to be able to fix that script, because you have to get in the development queue, the QA queue, and then the production release to production queue. What UCS Director does is after it's been installed, it goes out and it does an infrastructure discovery, so it understands the physical and logical relationships between all of the components within your infrastructure. It then puts that into a database. So when you're creating the workflows, you can go out and validate them before you put them into production, and it's checking. And if you have any mistakes, it'll come up and flag them and say, you know, this VLAN isn't configured correctly, or this is going to the wrong place. So that when a workflow goes into production, you can be sure that it's solid and it will work and keep your business up and running. The other thing is that it's the only product that out of the box is able to provision and configure storage volumes, set up the SAN, set up the IP network, deploy bare metal servers, load a hypervisor or a bare metal system, all within a single operation, while at the same time resolving all of these dependencies that I just mentioned through model-based orchestration.
So Joan, I'm going to test your dot release knowledge now. We have a question here saying if someone's currently using 3.4.1.1, they're asking what is probably the current version, and then if we're ready to indicate when the next version will be coming out, any insight we can give to answer that question?
So I believe the current version is 3.4.1.2, and by the end of next week, we will be releasing the next version of UCS Director, which will provide VMAX support. It will be supporting NetApp ONTAP 8.2 for cluster mode, and it will also be providing greater support for vSpecs.
Awesome, great. I'm going to keep coming back to UCS Director, but I do want to continue to reward the people who ask questions. So there is a question up above about the UCS Central. Eric, I don't know if you want to address that, or Ranjit, UCS Central.
I can.
Okay.
So the question was basically, can you have a global ID kind of pool to provide certain MAC address or worldwide port names for a particular pod? So we have the capability of having global identifier pools, but create what's called a domain group qualifier that specifies, let's say I have a big block of MAC pools or a big block of worldwide port name pools, and specifies certain blocks of those ID pools for a particular domain group. So I can have one big pool of identifiers, but say the first 10 go to one domain group, the next 10 go to another domain group. So those, when you create those identifier pools, you can definitely specify what domain groups those will go to.
Awesome, great. All right, Joan, back to you. UCS Director, I know the answer, but can it only manage Cisco environments, or can it manage, multi-vendor environments?
It manages multi-vendor, of course. We're Cisco, so we're going to be able to manage Nexus and MDS and Cisco UCS better than anything else. However, we understand that data centers are heterogeneous, and so it does also support Dell, HP, and IBM solutions, because the goal here is to prove the manageability of the data center. And believe it or not, this does hold true even for some other networking products, including Brocade. So one of the things that we plan to do in the future is to continue to increase this multi-vendor capability into multi-vendor storage beyond NetApp, EMC, and VCE. We also have an API that allows UCS Director to be able to be integrated up to higher level orchestration tools, for example, BMC, HP Software, IBM Tivoli, and Microsoft System Center. So think of it as UCS Director automates the infrastructure, and then these management tools sit on top.
Great. I mean, we know people need help coming to UCS, so if we have to help manage some of their complexities so they can see the value and come to us, that's a great way to do it. So UCS Director for Unified and Management Automation Tools. Any last comments, summaries on how it works? What's the best thing you would like to leave us with? Okay.
Well, one of the things that's really important is we need to have collaboration within the data center, because let's face it, data centers are complex places, and all of these tools were not made to design to work together. And so one of the benefits of UCS Director is it brings all these administrators together, and their best practices become part of workflows so that they don't have to focus in on these mundane tasks anymore. They can be freed up to go do innovative new services, and all of their knowledge and expertise is built into the workflows.
Awesome. So I've learned a lot of new things today. I've learned about the magic of our single connect. I learned about instant gratification. I learned about Johnny storage. I've learned about the power of APIs and resources. I'm going to go around. You guys have any last comments or words you would like to leave our audience with?
I guess
Todd,
I'll start.
Let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the key thing to understand about UCS is that we come in peace. Maybe it'd be the way I describe it, right? It's a system that was intentionally designed to not require a disruption to your current operating process, but really, build a platform that could allow you to take those operating processes to the next level. So, especially with UCS Director now being able to incorporate other vendor servers in the environment, it's a way to start building something that has a lot more power for automation versus what you might have had in the past, but doesn't require you to do some sort of clean break or a forklift of everything that you do today. And that's crucial, because nobody nobody can swap the engine out while they're midair. That's probably the most important thing.
Great. Eric, any words you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate one thing that Ranjit mentioned. Definitely would like for folks that are interested in being, providing, getting access to more of a community or user-based community to head out to communities.cisco.com/UCS Manager or /UCSM, I mean, and feel free to post questions, post your scripts and whatever you're doing. Because the more that we can work together, the better that that we can learn what to add, what to change with things like Power Tool, the emulator, and such.
Ranjit.
Yes. So I just want to reiterate the fact that the partner ecosystem is so rich. The UCS management capabilities are very rich, and there is a partner ecosystem. If that doesn't work, there's also the option of going to a CLI or writing your own. So it's a very rich environment and can be utilized in different ways to help the final goal of either running your own application, running your infrastructure, whatever it is. It's a very rich environment.
And Joann, the power of going last.
So I want to take a different tact. Use your favorite search engine to go to Cisco Build and Price. Click on Data Center Automation, and up will come Cisco UCS Director. There's a tab there that says Get a Free Evaluation. It's for 30 days. Do it, and you'll see how much it helps you.
That's great. Great advice, guys, for all that. I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to share all your knowledge, and I'd like to thank you out there who took the time to listen. We really, I'm going to reiterate what Eric said, really enjoy the conversation, want to make this more interactive. Please communicate with us. We're here to help you. We're here to grow together and really build the services we roll out to our joint end customers out there in the world. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll be seeing you online soon.
Thanks, Jim.